Hi, this is Stephen Brower from Mountain Valley Community College. This is an exceptional video. This video is going to stink. This video is on exceptions. So because of my fear of the snow, we're not having class on the 2nd. The 4th is going to be lab time. In the lab, I did make a reference to 4 different files for you to take a look at, and that'll help for working on the lab. Before looking at those 4 files, I want to just show what exceptions are, how we have been getting them. So remember back in chapter 2, one of the things that we saw for specifically dialog boxes was to take a string and parse it as an integer. And if I go and run this one right here, this first parse, the 7812, that worked fine. The second parse, 8, actually produced a number format exception error. And this is really ugly. The program stops running, and this is not the kind of thing that a user wants to see. So what we can do is we can, if we're doing something that we know can cause an exception like this, we can catch the exception. And by catching the exception, we don't get this ugly output that we have here. So to catch an exception, we use a try catch. So try means we're about to do something that may cause an error, and catch, we actually would list, we would have multiple catches, one for each type of exception that might be created. In this case, since number format exception is what's being generated, we can try to catch the number format exception. Well, for this first one, the 7812, it should attempt to catch it, but it doesn't produce an error, and this one should produce the output. This second one here, 8, when it tries to parse it, it should raise the exception, which will catch and say it can't be converted to an integer. So now that this try catch is done for both of the parses, the first one goes through fine as it did previously. The second one, instead of the program crashing, it now is just doing, in this case, a message saying, hey, we can't convert that to an integer. When we saw files, just jump over here, if we try to open a file that didn't exist, we got a file not found exception. Now, this was one that we had to have this throws saying to throw the file not found exception, and it would propagate it out to what called it. In this case, the outer environment is what it got propagated to. But we also can do a try catch, where we can do a try, and since right here is when the file is opened, that's the statement that may potentially raise the exception of the file not found. So then if we have a catch, I'll come back to this one in a second, here's the catch for the file not found, it's going to say the file does not exist. So now when I run this one, that it's caught that the file doesn't exist, and then it's able to end, the program's able to end without exception, because we're catching the exception. Let me go and fix this file name. And now if I run it, okay, we're getting the output that we want. Suppose, oops, wrong one. Hold on a second. Okay, I have the wrong file. Here we go. Suppose we actually had bad data in our file. I'll actually go and stick in the 8, since that's what we did previously. If now we try to go and run this, non-numeric data found in the file. So since we actually had, in this case, non-numeric data, one of the other catches we had is input mismatch exception. And by this being caught as well, if, back up here, here we're expecting a double. If we didn't get a double, that exception is raised, and then we pass that through. So all the demos up to this point, so the this bad parse, which is catching an exception on the parse integer, and this reading from the file, which is not handling. Oh, actually, let me go and show this. Sorry. There's the input mismatch exception. So this bad example is not catching if the file doesn't exist. And then if the file does exist, it's not catching if there's bad data in the file. So in these demos here, we're catching exceptions that exist in Java. So there is documentation on all the Java exceptions that exist. What we can do is we actually can create our own exceptions. Now, let me first plead the case. Let me do this bank account bad. So bank account bad, if we look at the instantiation, if we look at the constructor, which is run during instantiation, whatever the starting balance is, it just assigns it. Whatever the interest rate is, it just assigns it. And if we pass in, now I have 3 things that are being created here. Let's go and run them. And the first one, I mean, this is okay because we have a positive starting balance, we have a positive interest. But the second one, I have a negative starting balance, but it's letting it go through. This third one, we have a negative interest rate, and it's letting it go through. So what we can do in our constructor is we actually can catch, whoops, sorry, I'll get this right. Oh, wrong place. I'll get this right. We actually can generate within, I'm sorry, I just saw an alert about the storm. What we can do is in the constructor, we can say that we're going to raise exceptions. Now, these are not built into Java. So there is no negative starting balance exception in Java. There is no negative interest rate in Java. These are the exceptions that we actually have created, and I'll go to that in a second. This is the test to see, well, if we do have a negative starting balance, throw the negative starting balance. If we do have a negative interest rate, throw the negative interest rate. What these files are, so negative interest rate, it's extends exception. So this negative interest rate is a subclass of exception. So this is an exception file, and it has 2 constructors. One that's blank, a no work constructor, which just gives a generic message. The other one receives a value and echoes out what the error is. This other exception file, the negative starting balance exception, also extends exception. So this is a subclass of exception. And again, it has the 2 constructors, the no work constructor and the one that receives the amount. So in this bank account, when we're saying that on construction, it could potentially throw one of these, which now means that if we were to use this bank account, we have to do a try catch on instantiation. Ew. Wait, which one is this? Here we go. So that's right. Let me do this one first. So here's the good one. I'm just going to suggest this one. And the try catch is being done, saying, okay, well, if there is a negative starting balance, let's catch it. If there is a negative interest rate, let's catch it. In this case, neither of them were bad. So it's able to create the account, add the interest, and then display here is the amount after the interest. In this one, this is creating the 2 bad ones. So this should attempt to create this object, which will actually fail. So with the negative starting balance, it should be catching it here. When it tries to instantiate this one, this should be a negative interest rate, and it should be catching that here. So this one, we're not actually allowing the creation of those 3, of these other 2 accounts to occur. So we can't create, in this case, we can't create an object if the data to create the object is bad. Comparing this back to pizza that we saw back in chapter 3, in that pizza I didn't raise exceptions. If the size was too small or too big, I just defaulted it to a value. If the number of toppings was too small or too big, I just defaulted it to a value. What we could have done is on instantiation of the pizza, then said, raise an exception. Then there could have been one saying, it's an improper size, another one saying it was the improper number of toppings. All right, so what's the reason for all this again? Hang on. Okay, so the lab that you're going to be working on Wednesday, and there's details about here about the classes being created. By the way, this retail item is partially created in the starting file. You're going to go in and fill in the blanks, as it were. The exceptions, you're going to have to go and write those as well. Well, for writing the exceptions, the exceptions that have to be written here, negative units on hand exception, negative price exception. For writing the exceptions, refer to the negative interest rate and the negative starting balance. So these two exception files here, that's going to be what you're going to refer to for when you write these two exception classes here. Now, the retail item in the constructor, you're going to have to throw one of these two exceptions. And so the reference for that is in bank account. We look, one is that the exceptions are being thrown, throws exceptions, that they're potentially being thrown, and then the test to see if we throw the exception, throw it, test if we throw the exception, and then throw it. And then the third thing that you're going to be doing in part of the lab is you're going to be working on modifying the driver. I have a partially written driver, and you're going to go and throw try-catches in. So a try-catch for the instantiation, of the retail item object. And so for that, you look at the try-catches that we have in this account test. So it's these 4 demo files, so the negative interest rate, negative starting balance, bank account, and account test. These 4 demo files are the ones that you'll be referencing for the lab on Wednesday. And so that's it for this exceptional video. Okay, now the video sucked. That's it for this video on exceptions. Enjoy this nice snowy weather, and I will see you guys on Wednesday.